about a new species of shark that I discovered along with my professor here at Los Angeles Marine Labs and another professor. But before I do that, I wanted to talk to you guys about the bigger picture of chondrichthyon taxonomy. So this is basically the discovery of new species. Chondrichthyons are sharks in all of their relatives. So this would include stingrays, ghost sharks, which we also call chimeras. And what I want you to notice is that historically, species discovery rates have been pretty low. And then all of a sudden, in the last decade here, the 2000s, it shoots up. So from the last 3 decades, we're discovering about 6 sharks a year, and then all of a sudden, there was a huge boost up into almost 18 new species being discovered annually. Now, my lab, the Pacific Shark Research Center, we've discovered about 15% of all new species within the last decade. And talking about where these discoveries are happening, well, the top 3 most speciose genera of sharks include the Requiem sharks. So this is in the genus Picarinus. I wanted to point this out because this is basically what we think of when we imagine a shark. And not just us here in this room, but the general public. This is the iconic look of a shark. But the other 3 most speciose genera include deep water species like the Amopterus genus, the lantern sharks, as well as the cat sharks in the genus Aposterus. And so these are some of the lesser known species and not necessarily what somebody might picture of when they consider a shark or what a shark should look like. Now this issue prompted my professor to coin a term called lost sharks. And this is the idea that these more well-known species kind of overshadow these lesser known species where a majority of the new species are actually being described. So this lost shark idea, just to warn you, if you try to Google it, I am not talking about sci-fi movies or conspiracy theories on lost. Again, it's this idea that there's these species of sharks that we're not very familiar with. And I like this article because it really points out my problem. Who knows what that is? Hammerhead, right? So not quite a lesser known species. So you can see, even in this article, they kind of got it wrong. What I'm talking about are lesser known species like this one over here. This is a species of chimera. It's a ghost shark. You can also notice it doesn't look quite as pretty as the other species of the hammerhead. And that's also because a lot of the species that we're discovering are actually found in museums, preserved specimens that have been there for who knows how long. So here's how I got into this project. My professor put up this exact slide during a presentation. He mentioned all these different hotspots around the world that we know of, where you can find chondrichthyons. You can see we have some here in the Indian Ocean. Australia is definitely a really big hotspot. Ourselves in the Northeast Pacific, we do have quite a few sharks. But over here, along Central America, on the Pacific Ocean side, we don't really know what's going on. And it's not that we have no idea that there's sharks here. It's just that this is a very poorly surveyed area. And so, in my attempt to get a free trip to Costa Rica, I mentioned to my professor that I speak Spanish. And what he mentioned was, no problem, 5 years ago we already did a research expedition to that area aboard the Miguel Alder. So, super for them. What that meant for me, though, was that I only had to walk to my local museum where they had collections, and my job was then to look at these specimens and decide if they were new. So what I knew at this point was that I had a deep sea squaloid. And here is that group, the order Squaloformes. Within this group, we have some of the species with the longest age known to maturity, lowest fecundity, meaning they're not having a lot of babies, and longest generation times. So what this means is that we have species in here that if they were overfished, they would be highly susceptible to that. And yet within this group, I turned out to have a species, and I'll show you which one it is in just a second, that was the least poorly studied group. So looking at my specimens, what I noticed is I had a shark with 2 dorsal fins. You see not all of them have that. And it glue in the dark. So with that, I knew I had a lantern shark species. This is the group with the most species compared to all the other Squaloformes, and yet it's the least studied. And so As I'm going further into this, I have in the back of my mind that whole lost shark problem. So here I have 46 species of lost sharks. Now going further into it, of course I want to know what kind of lost shark I have. Well, one interesting thing about these sharks is that each one of them has unique dentition. So by looking at the teeth of my shark, and these are the teeth of my species, you can notice that the top teeth and the bottom teeth are not the same. And here's a little comparison, here's a zoomed in version so you can see. So these are the top teeth, better for grabbing and grasping, and the bottom teeth here are better for cutting. And these right here are the teeth of the genus Epmopterus. So by this simple comparison, I knew that that was the shark that I had. But of course, the genus Epmopterus is also the most speciose of all the genuses of the lanternheads. So what did I do at that point? Looking more closely at this species, what I could actually tell was that these groups are further subdivided into 4 groups. And all I had to do at this point is look at the characteristics of the dermal denticles. So these are basically like teeth on the skin of sharks, and each group has a unique morphology for that. In addition, they also have these very unique flank markings, so these black patterns you can see that are of glowing photophores along their tails. And from that, I knew that I had a species of lantern shark from the genus Epmopterus from the Spinax clan. So I had 9 species at this point now that I had to whittle down. So here are those 9 species. Now the one thing that I didn't mention to you, which was extremely convenient, was the fact that my species actually lacks flank markings. I have a very dark, sleek species of lantern shark, and as a result of that, I could quickly eliminate a majority of the species. And so, for the remainder of the paper that I wrote with my professor and our other colleague, it really went into why this new species of shark I had in no way could be one of these other species. Because in addition to scientists discovering new species every year, we're also finding that the ranges of species are expanding. So a fish that we thought maybe was only in the Indian Ocean, we find it somewhere else. So looking at a map, a distribution of these known species, if you're interested where I got this, there's a really cool website called the Chondrichthyan Tree of Life. You can go onto it, click different species, and it'll automatically show you the range of those species. You can even, quick side note, go into there and look at 3D versions of animals so you can see what they look like with their skin on, and you can see what they look like with just their bones and muscles. So again, using the map that they had for me, what I noticed is the shark Epmopterus princeps was only here in the northern Atlantic area, so this is this orange one. Epmopterus granulosus is also called a southern lantern shark, and it was only around here in the southern ocean, and you can see these light blue areas. This is that species of shark. And then Epmopterus novi. This was the only shark that was really along the Pacific Ocean, along this eastern area, but you can see it's actually endemic to 2 ridges, the Nazca and Salih Gomez ridges, right over here. My species, again, we only found it right along here off of the coast of Central America. And let me zoom in so you can see more specifically where we found these. So what I wanted you to notice is it was all around Central America, but it's also based on only 8 specimens. So each one of these locations is exactly one species that I found to try to prove that it was a new species. So how did I decide that this shark was actually new? Well, as I mentioned before, it was all black, it lacked flank markings, it was in a unique new location. I didn't think it was this new species based on teeth, based on its size. It's actually much smaller than any of these sharks, and a whole bunch of other cool things, and you can check out the paper from there. Really easy. But with that, I was completely certain that I had a new species of lantern shark. And this process took about a year to go through, double check, make sure, to also make sure that I was an expert in the 37 known species of lantern sharks so that there could be no confusion that this was a new one. Now, this sort of process can be very laborious, and as a result of that, people can oftentimes, scientists I should say, not take the time to come up with an interesting name. So as a result of that, we have 2 brown lantern sharks and 2 lined lantern sharks, and a group of lost sharks that are easily forgotten. So you can see that these redundant common names aren't helpful. So I just you were going to see, if we get started, is those very short people are my cousins. They range in age from 8 to 14 years old. And what we did was we created a Google Hangout because we're actually in many different places around the United States. And we did this Google Hangout to come up with a name for a shark. And so through this video, you would be seeing a bunch of different names that we came up with. Maybe during one of the breaks, I can put it on. But in any case, they came up with the Ninja Lantern Shark. Of course they did, right? So the scientific name is actually Emopterus benchlii. So we named it after Peter Benchley. We thought this was fitting because this is me at the Benchley Award. So this is Wendy Benchley, his widow. This is Dr. Sylvia Earle. And at these Benchley Awards, the whole idea was the fact that Peter Benchley felt so bad about the movie Jaws and the negative reaction that it had. But not a lot of people realized that he had spent so much of his time and career afterwards trying to protect the oceans and sharks. So we thought it'd be fitting for this lost shark to be named after someone whose conservation work probably wasn't as well known. Now, of course, that Ninja Lantern Shark thing, not as easy to get my professors convinced. So I got some help from some high school students. They created a little campaign for the Ninja Lantern Shark, and after that, my professors were completely convinced. So now I'd like to show you Emopterus benchlii, the Ninja Lantern Shark, named for its uniform black coloration and reduced photophores, which are reminiscent of ninjas' typical outfit and something different. So, quick real aside, I just wanted to mention, I can talk about this at the break. Another project that I have going on is a citizen science project for hammerheads. As I mentioned before, we are all well aware of what a hammerhead looks like. Not everyone is aware that they're actually common in Southern California. So I'm doing a citizen science project, collecting data, and we're just getting into that season. So if anyone sees a hammerhead, there was one spotted in Monterey last year. So if you see one, let me know. Thank you, and I will now take any questions. Ninja Lantern Shark really took off in the media, and Shirley Lagoon even made a cartoon about it.
Any questions for our speaker? Yes.
Yeah, I'm just curious if anybody's been looking at the functional role of these lost sharks. Presumably they're mesopelagic, they're deep water sharks. So what do they feed on? Things like that.
Most of what we know is from the better study with lantern sharks. And so even though they're small, because they're in the deep sea, they are one of the largest animals there. So they might be playing a more dominant role in those ecosystems, and they seem to be eating the general thing that you would say in those situations. So small shrimps, smaller invertebrates. But in terms of any specialization in their diets, we're not sure yet. We just know what they're capable of eating based on their dentition. And that's going to be shrimps and small fish.
Any other questions? All right, thank you so much.